So the White House says they want to cut Social Security insurance payments over time using a tricky little technique called the chained CPI. Instead of actually measuring real inflation, this particular consumer price index, CPI, is chained to consumers' behavior. They call it a hedonic and quality adjustment to make it sound scientific. Here's how it works. If the price of beef goes up, instead of measuring that as inflation, what they'll do is, how are people behaving? Well, price of beef goes up, some people start eating cheaper chicken. So instead of measuring actual inflation, as you would see if you just measured the rising cost of meats, the chain CPI measures the behavior of people moving from beef to cheaper chicken, and thus lowers the cost of living adjustment. Oh, look at that. People are eating cheaper now. If more and more seniors, and not just seniors, there are 20-year-olds on Social Security. There are 30-year-olds on Social Security. A third of all Social Security payments are not to seniors. They're to disabled people, widows, orphans. If more and more people can't afford chicken and move to cheaper cat food, then the chained CPI adjusts Social Security insurance payments. And by the way, along with it, millions of disabled vets payments that are tied to Social Security. I got a rant from Bernie Sanders about this. Here it is. You go over to sanders.senate.gov. You can sign up for his, or bernie.org, and you can sign up for his newsletter. He says, we must do deficit reduction, but not by cutting programs for people who lost arms, legs, and eyes defending our country. We must not balance the budget on the backs of men and women who already sacrificed for us in Afghanistan and Iraq. This was a joint press release between Senator Sanders and leaders of the American Legion and the VFW, which my grandfather was a member of, Veterans of Foreign Wars. Actually, my grandfather was a member of the DAV, the Disabled American Veterans, or the Disabled Veterans of Foreign Wars. In any case, he was in World War I. So anyhow, now they can eat cheaper brands of cat food because they've readjusted the Social Security to say, oh, look at this, people are not eating chicken anymore. Now they're eating cat food. So, you know, and in bulk, that's cheaper than chicken. So, and the Republicans love this idea. I have pointed out this story to you over and over and over again, but it deserves restating. Back in the mid-'70s, Republican strategist Jude Wanniski, in an article titled Taxes and a Two-Santa Theory, correctly pointed out that the American people loved Social Security brought to America by Democrats and continually defended by Democrats, and Republicans had always played the role of Scrooge, saying things like Social Security are not legitimate functions of government, old age poverty should be fixed by churches, and retirement income should be handled by Wall Street. Yes, this was the Republican position, and the Democrats, Wanniski pointed out, were essentially the Social Security Santa Clauses, giving Americans what they wanted, even though Americans were also, by the way, gladly paying for that very same Social Security. So the job the Republicans faced was twofold. First, they had to become Santa Claus themselves, because being a Social Security Santa Claus had already been taken. They should, Wanniski proposed, become the tax cut Santa Clauses. Tax cuts for everybody, especially for rich people. Ho, ho, ho. And the second really big job was to get Democrats to shoot their own Santa Claus, especially Social Security. Problem for Republicans was that Social Security was so popular, I mean, it literally saves lives every day and has since 1936, that even Republicans wanted some of the glow. Even more problematic for the Republicans. This is a huge problem for Republicans. Social Security has nothing whatsoever to do with our budget deficit. It's a whole separate thing. It's totally solvent and will be for at least the next 20 years, and it'll pay 80% of benefits forever. And it will remain totally solvent forever and pay 100% of benefits with just a very small tweak of just lifting the payroll cap so millionaires pay the same percentage into it as people working at Walmart. Even Ronald Reagan, St. Ronald, in a rare moment of candor, pointed this out.
Social Security, let's lay it to rest once and for all. I told you never would I do such a thing. But I tell you also now, Social Security has nothing to do with the deficit. Social Security is totally funded by the payroll tax levied on employer and employee. If you reduce the outgo of Social Security That money would not go into the general fund to reduce a deficit. It would go into the Social Security Trust Fund. So Social Security has nothing to do with balancing a budget or erasing or lowering the deficit.
That was from the presidential debate. I mean, this is Ronald Reagan in the presidential debate. I mean, that bears repeating. You could cut Social Security all you want. You could even end Social Security altogether, and it wouldn't reduce our budget deficit by one single penny. Social Security is a completely self-funded, self-contained program, and it's sitting on a surplus of over $2.5 trillion. But it's the signature program that makes the American people think of the Democrats as Santa Claus. And the number one priority of the Republican strategists is to get a Democratic president to take a shot at Santa Claus. Ever since FDR brought us Social Security, not one single Democratic president has ever, in the history of the Republic, suggested shooting or even nicking the Social Security Santa Claus until Obama. And what's particularly astounding about this is how effective this White House has been at getting supposedly progressive commentators and journalists to jump on board. Laura Gottesdiener points this out over at Alternet. A number have responded positively to this week's Democratic Party conference call on messaging this and are actually trying to say basically, it's not such a big cut, not a big deal. No droids in this car. You know, it's nice to be thought of as an insider, especially in Washington, D.C. It's cool to get invited to the right parties. It's an adrenaline rush to be invited to the White House for an off-the-record briefing or a conference call. I can tell you all those things from personal experience. But all those things said, it is flat-out crazy for a Democratic president to shoot the Democrats' number one Santa Claus program, and it's crazy for progressives to try to pretend that it's anything else. If President Obama wants to go along with the changed CPI, he will be the first Democratic president in the history of the party to have actually cut Social Security. Even though it doesn't do a thing, nothing to reduce the budget deficit. And like we saw with Bill Clinton reforming welfare, once the Republicans can corner a Democratic president into shooting a Democratic Santa Claus, the Republicans can finish the job through the death of 1,000 paper cuts over the next decade and in the states. And everybody only remembers that it was a Democratic president who started it. Since Obama has brought into his negotiations with the Republicans an offer to cut more out of Social Security than he would cut out of the bloated Pentagon budget. And now he's supporting the Republicans' Santa Claus and shooting the Democrats' Santa Claus. And like with Clinton and welfare, this will just be the beginning once the first cut is made. Eventually, the bloody carcass of Social Security will be swept up by right-wing cons like Peterson, Simpson, and Bowles and handed over with a bow and a ribbon to the billionaires on Wall Street. If President Obama is still pushing a changed CPI tomorrow, December 21st, 12/21/12, then maybe the Mayans were right. It's the end of the world as we know it. Or at least the end of the Democratic Party as we knew it. Because Jude Wanniski was right. The Democratic Party came to power and held power in this country repeatedly, over and over and over again, throughout many, many generations. And this was the party founded by Jefferson. By doing what the people want. Not necessarily what the billionaires want, what the people want. And the people are saying, hey, I'd like me some Social Security, please. I'd like to have that insurance policy.